So, the big objections that we're presenting, they fall in four categories for today, to keep it simple. The first one is the objection that if an entity exists and then stops existing, how can it come back to life? Or, sorry, how can it come back into existence? That's one. The second objection is if you are, as a human being, and this body has decomposed, how can life be brought back into it? The third objection has to do with divine power, and the fourth objection has to do with divine knowledge. Okay, so this is in short what we're presenting. And again, we're trying to keep it short and quick and simple. So, the first objection, as we said, is the re-existence. So something that existed now is going to exist again. The re-existence of the annihilated. And I intentionally wrote annihilated or non-existent. What are we talking about here? So I want you to think a little bit more abstractly, more philosophically. You have an entity that exists. You have something that exists. And then it completely ceases to exist. It's no longer there. Is it possible to return that entity back into existence? That's a question. And are we still talking about the same entity if it ceased to exist? Okay, that's the objection. It's a little bit more complicated than that. That's my best way to present it. Okay. So, where does this come from? Where does the issue come from? This objection. What gives rise to this objection? So before I answer it, I wanted to spend time linking it back to two topics, both of which we've already addressed. One of them, inshallah, we'll address more. The topic of death and the topic of a human being. Depending on how you understand death, and depending on how you understand what a human being is, you may or may not ask this question. How? If in your understanding of death, death equals non-existence, moving from existing to non-existing, being annihilated completely from existence, then maybe you're allowed to ask this question. From the other side, if in your understanding of a human being, and again linked to death, you think that a human being moves from existing to non-existence just because they have died, in other words, just because their body has died, then you're allowed to ask this question. Otherwise, if you are like us, we do not believe that death is moving into non-existence, nor do we believe that when a human being dies, it means they cease to exist, then this question does not make sense. This question has nothing to do with the afterlife or resurrection. It might be a really cool, interesting question to examine philosophically, but this is not what we're claiming. When we say there's an afterlife, when we say that we're going to be resurrected, we never claimed that human beings existed, were an entity that existed, and then it ceased to exist. We never said that. We said human beings are entities made up of two parts, a body and a soul. The body stops working and the human being dies. The soul continues. The soul does not die and does not cease to exist, and the soul is actually who you are, not your body. So if those points are well understood, when death happens, death is simply interpreted or understood as moving from one reality to another, one world to another. But there's no annihilation. Nothing stops existing. Whatever existed before still exists after. The body still exists, it's just non-functional. And it decomposes, but it's still there. The soul, nothing happens to it. It just moves to another world. So if you keep this in mind, then the answer is simple. It's just, you have to be careful not getting tricked by the question that death equals non-existence. Now that's if you limit it to the materialist point of view, which we have said again and again does not work for all the reasons that we've discussed. So the answer to this objection is something one that we have already answered. That's why it's here, so that you go back to the previous lessons. And then the whole point of this lesson is to establish those answers from the Holy Quran. And so even from the Holy Quran, we've already established this. So the example, this is one example, there are many. If you go to this verse in the Holy Quran, chapter 32, verses 10 and 11, it says, they say, when we have been lost in the dust or in the earth or in the soil, so we've died and our bodies now are underground, shall we be indeed created anew? And so what I want you to focus on is the we. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they say, when we have died, shall we be indeed created anew? And the Quran answers, rather, they disbelieve in the encounter with their Lord. Okay? We're not going to comment on that. We did in the past. Say, you will be taken back. So this is where I want you to concentrate on when they say we and how the Holy Quran answers them. If your body has decomposed, it's dead and decomposed underground. So what is the you? You have died, and yet you are being taken back completely, fully. That's tawaffi. When the angel of death takes you back completely. What is he taking back? The body? No. Body is in underground. So the you is the answer. The key is in the you. Who are you? Are you the body or are you the soul? You are being referred to as that which the Holy Quran is saying the angel takes back completely. The tawaffi, which is your soul. And so if you keep this in mind and you go back to the objection is when you have ceased to exist, how can you be brought back into existence? You have not ceased to exist. You have not ceased to exist. Your body is underground and your soul was taken by the angel of death and it's still there. So that objection does not work. Okay, that's why I said, if you want to discuss that in general as a philosophical topic, if something ceases to exist, can it be brought back? And can we still say that it's the same thing or not? That's fine. But it has nothing to do with resurrection. It has nothing to do with the afterlife. Okay? So you will be taken back or reclaimed by the angel of death who has been charged with you, then you will be brought back to your Lord. Again, it's you who is brought back, and that is your soul, but that's a reference to the afterlife. So we're going to leave that aside.